of just jibber jabber, and I edited it together. It is probably the best ones I've done. It's hilarious. It's really funny. I had to limit myself because it was going to be more than 5 minutes.
We are really turning into a Canadian club here, right? Yeah, he gets it. He gets it.
Canadian
but you're going to reach for something.
What are you wearing there?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
wearing a maple leaf, essentially a Canadian flag. Is it like a jersey or a sweater? Or
this is the hockey jersey from the last Winter Olympics.
Of course.
You realize, Norm, that I'm probably going to use
moment here, Norm. This is your country's time to shine, and here we've got you to talk all about the national indoor pastime of the winter. This has got to be just you're eating this up. I can see this.
I should go put a toque on.
Norm, I'm just going to warn you right now. The song I am thinking about using, where the intro is "Blame Canada" from South Park, just on your jersey alone.
Well, or you could apologize and then start off with Dennis Miller's asshole.
Well, we want you to come back. That's the thing.
You're doing enough apologizing for all of us here, Norm. Yeah. First of all, where is the toque?
Well, they're all upstairs. They're in the big bin of toques and mitts because today is nice because it's only -20, but the last week with the wind chill it was like -40.
Yeah. Today we actually had some of the snow melt down here, so I know you're not used to that happening. But when the snow melts,
I don't know what snow is.
Well, when the snow melts at this time of year, either hell has frozen over or the Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup, and both cases are, just as realistic.
Oh boy! Well,
and now I've just offended everybody from Ontario.
Oh, I am so out of tune with hockey. I need my buddy David here to translate you for me, Norm, because he's a big hockey fan. He would have got that. Yeah, I'm so out of tune though with my Canadian things. I didn't even realize that.
That's like that
was an insult.
It's like the Yankees and the Red Sox.
Ah, gotcha.
Well, I don't know hockey or baseball, so I understood none of that.
It's like Slytherin and Gryffindor.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah. We got a reference for TC.
You got to dial it down for me, guys. Dial it down.
Yeah, you got the hat to boot too. Wow. So did you play any games with Daniel wearing that hat?
No. Anytime I wear a hat, he takes it off and just basically hucks it. And then the moment that I leave any board gaming table that we're doing to go get my hat, he cheats and he starts moving things around and he comes back and he's. Oh yeah, I'm proud and offended at the same time.
Yeah, it's sneaky, but it's it's clever.
Oh yeah, and the creative part of his brain's working. So how can I?
That's right. That's right. That's like when a kid insults me in my Spanish classroom in Spanish.
Bueno.
Yeah. It's like, okay, am I offended by this? Because you're speaking Spanish and I feel like pride. And at the same time, am I going to be fueling a fire that's going to ultimately come back to bite me?
Yeah, you didn't conjugate that verb properly because I can't really do it to myself. So,
yeah. Oh, we're not learning those words in my classroom, Norm.
Oh man, I think with you, it's probably the same thing with me. That just in dialoguing with my students, all of a sudden I'll go to say something and I'll stop and go, "Is this word?" Should I not say this word because of the way you guys interpret it now? And they just look at me and go, no, we don't say that anymore. Oh, yeah, it's like, I'm not talking to you guys anymore. Anything I say is like old man dictionary or there's a new definition for it. So I quit.
Just tell them that you are on fleek. And that's the word to use now. It's horrible and I hate it. And that's why I use it.
What is fleek?
Yeah, like on fleek. It's like or you've probably heard lit. Like, oh, it's lit. Lit.
What is this, like Spicoli Fast Times at Ridgemont High or what?
It's like we've gone backwards. Yeah, I think I'm convinced that it's a cycle. Yeah, that we just keep repeating, man. Like back in the Middle Ages, there was the cycle. There was the lit cycle, and that was when they discovered fire. That was when everybody started going around saying, I'm lit. And now we're going back there. It just takes a cultural, it just takes a little bit of a new wave for the culture to ride, stoner culture, at the beginning. At the beginning, burning didn't mean the same thing that it means now.
Well, I think come July 1st, Canada's going to have to, fix their dialogue because we're going to be a recreational country, apparently.
Oh,
a recreational country?
Oh yeah, that's the new laws coming across federally on July 1st.
Wow, that'll be interesting.
Which is Canada's birthday, so hey. Spark up, I guess.
Yeah, there's gonna be some different types of fireworks at that celebration, right?
Oh. Yeah, it's such an interesting thing to follow in the media and in social media because I don't know, it's so on opposite side of the fences with most people. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it does. It's one of those where you can just mention it and then you just hear the sphincter snapping shut.
Yeah, and most of the times it's somebody who's complaining about the new law coming in as they crack a beer and put their car keys in the other hand. It's like,
we got a double standard here.
It's already been legal here for a while, so it's been you get interesting aromas now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're lagging a little bit behind, but we have about a 10-hour drive down to where the heavy cardboard guys are in Denver, and that's where they're testing it out now.
Yeah, Washington State, Oregon, and Colorado. Yeah, good times. Woo!
I shared the pop-out chat there with you. It looks like you got a viewer, and anyway, I'll say hi here.
Let me just click this open here.
Last time I tried to do the Hangout toolbox, it was like broken as all get out. So I actually think I'm gonna just abandon all hope for that.
Abandoned.
Hey, I got the chat in a separate window.
There we go.
Cool. You know what? I was so nervous about doing this and representing that I did research and I made notes.
Oh my goodness, Norm! You can read them, right?
I'll make you feel better, Norm. I've never played it. I've never played this, so I'm not going to be any help whatsoever.
Well, I mean, I was thinking, it's like, well, what am I going to talk about? I could explain the nuts and bolts, but to me, it's like I'm not really reviewing it. My connection to it is so experiential. I mean, just like everybody else's connection to something they've played since they're a kid kind of thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, I mean, with Crokinole, I have the same connection with cribbage. It just reminds me of, and in both cases, hanging out at the lake in the summertime. Oh, my computer wants to check for updates now.
In the summertime? Wait a minute. I thought Crokinole, you guys are huddling inside. Oh, that's right, because it's still frozen. You're out there ice fishing in the summertime.
Well, it's weird. It's kind of like, it's pardon the pun, but it's like a bipolar experience because in the summertime, you're at the lake, and at nighttime when it's it's nothing really to do, you play Crokinole inside, and you basically go till you fall asleep. And then same thing on the other end is in the middle of winter when it's way too cold to even go outside. You huddle up and you play some board games. And most of the time from like this board game renaissance is just blowing my mind because had this happened when I was a kid, I mean, hobby-wise, I would probably be like, forget the walls. I'm just going to make my house out of board game boxes.
Yeah, but if it would happen when I was a kid, I still have been attached to my Atari 2600 too hard.
I found this. This might blow your mind. I found at the lake in the attic cleaning up. I still have my original Pong.
There you go. How about what tank? Oh, combat. That's what it was. Combat.
Just a dial. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Have you ever tried firing it back up?
I was too scared to even touch it because it was starting to get like frozen overnight. And I'm like, if I even touch a frozen wire and it breaks, I'm just gonna cry.
Yeah, no, it is. I bought somebody's Intellivision years back, and it's way more trouble than they're worth, man. You end up getting it to where if somebody holds the cord right, then it won't shut off right as soon as you press the start button. And then so you got to have one person there just running support to make sure the console can hold together for the entirety of the match. Yeah,
and if I remember in television, one thumb has to hold down the plastic covering of the buttons because if that fell off, you didn't know what was going on. Oh, I remember that.
Yep, it was definitely a knockoff. All right, well, you guys ready to do this? You ready for this, Norm?
Absolutely.
Before we start, I just want to tell Norm that I've been inspired to take my child out to do board gaming, and I took Kate out thinking we'd only play like 3 or 4 hours. We ended up going 10 to 6 o'clock playing games at a public meeting. It was crazy, and her favorite game was Between Two Cities of all things.
Wow, yeah. No, that's an excellent intro game for new players drafting.
And then the next day, me and Carissa, me and my wife played Leaving Earth, and I successfully blew up a Saturn rocket on the launch pad. It only cost me $15 million. It was pretty cool.
Awesome. I've been trying to find that game because it's got a good solo play in it, apparently.
Yeah, if you have trouble finding a copy, one of the local board game stores up here got like 20 of them and can't sell them. And they sell them for like $50 or $55.
Oh, hey, I had an idea. And I'm just going to throw this out to you guys. And Joe might connect with it because it's very school-like. You know how when you send exchange students, like you go to another school for 3 months, and so someone comes to why don't we have like board game exchange students where it's like I'm going to take 5 of my board games and I'm going to ship them off to TC and Joe, and then they're going to ship me some of their board game students. And
I had this idea, and I'm going to do it. But I'm going to give Andy a copy of Credit Mobilier, and he'll never want anything from me ever again.
Do it wrong the first time, and it'll never happen again.
There you go. See, problem solved.
No, TC, I'll send you a box. You don't have to worry about it.
Just a bunch of dice.
Yep.
Okay, we can start now.
Let's kick her up. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the Long View, in which we take a closer look at games that have stood the test of time. This one, an exceptionally large amount of time. Tonight we're going to be talking about Crokinole. And if anybody knows anything about Crokinole, the first thing you'll learn is it is a game that originated from the great northern wilderness. Up there, the few acres of snow themselves, Canada. And as representative of Canada, he is there wearing a hockey jersey with Canada and a maple leaf.
Some kind of red leaf on it. I don't know. It hurts my eyes. It's like the fall. Is this fall? I don't know. Leaves are falling. It's red. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, Joe. I'm scared. Scared, Joe. Scared.
Yeah. It is. It's a whiteout up there. And Norm is going to try to hold our hands and guide us through. Norm, how are you doing tonight?
I'm going to start off by saying sorry because I'm going to basically offend most Canadians because they all have their own personal attachment to this game. So I apologize.
Yeah, is this the game where you like take a broomstick and you shoot the ice and you move the thing along? Is that what we're talking about?
It's close, but it's not.
Oh, I must be getting my ice games mixed up. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's like broom ball on a smaller surface, but nothing like broom ball.
But nothing like it. No, of course not. Well, we're going to ride the boats throughout this entire episode. Jump on your boats and ride them. And I'm excited to see where we're going to go here, because we're going to talk with Norm, who's done a lot of research on this. Norm, if anybody has listened to prior, has been on The Good, the Board, and the Ugly, also hosted by TC and myself, and that was one of the most entertaining episodes I've ever recorded. And
that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that one. That was great.
Absolute classic.
The whole time.
Yeah, you earned your place on the Long View. We'll see if you can keep it.
Well, yeah, he's here to talk about it. And your two co-hosts here are myself, Joe Sallin, and I'm joined out there on the West Coast by TC Reed.
Hello. We're it's not snowing here, guys. Oh,
It doesn't have to snow here anymore. It's already laid down a blanket. We've got about 3-4 inches, which is probably nothing compared to you there, Norm.
Well, I don't mind the snow. It's just the below normal, livable minus conditions that can wear on a person's character.
Or build it, as my dad would say.
Like Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
oh God.
Yeah, that's every winter for you guys up there, ain't it?
Yeah. A 10-day string of minus 30, and we're all walking through the door with a fire axe first.
Well, I would say, though, that had Jack Nicholson had a crokinole board, none of that would have ever had to happen.
Yeah. Well, we're not done yet.
So, Norm, you said you've taken some notes here, and I'd love to hear all that you have to tell us about your long and storied history with crokinole.
Storied? Oh, this could be a good story.
It's integral
The
to
sordid story of
person. I
crokinole.
hesitated when I said it, TC. Come on, you're already holding me accountable. Like, you can't do that, man. People know their hosts. They know not to hold me to high standards. Shame on you.
Oh, well, I don't.
See what I did there? See what I did?
Well, after this, I hope I don't create a scenario where there are no more standards. So,
We don't have any of those.
yeah. Well, do you guys want to know about the history of it?
Oh, please.
I thought I knew a good deal about it, but then, of course, me being the educator, and of course, you got to research it and you got to be able to answer every angle of it. So I found out that the oldest known crokinole board in the world was manufactured in 1876, and now it said Perth, but I also found a better detail, and it said Sebastopol, near Terrastock, which is where the world board game or crokinole championships are held, and it was by a craftsman named Eckhart Wettlaufer.
Huh.
So yeah, I knew it was in Ontario, and I knew it was shortly after Canada became a country. I think 9 years old apparently, and it was interesting to know that Ontario had that whole thing locked down. But considering that Canada was pretty much only Ontario and Quebec at the time, so good with that.
Hadn't pushed west to where you're at there up in the Bridge City, right?
I don't think civilization pushed this far at that point.
It still hasn't got there. I mean, we're still waiting on this, Norm.
The one interesting thing I found was, of course, the American economic machine kind of grabbed hold, and my notes say that several years after that, a registered American patent suggested 1880 as the time when commercial fabrication began in New York and then in Pennsylvania. So there must be some sort of ethnic connection, cultural connection, because they talked a lot about Lutheran influence, Mennonite influence. So I don't know my Pennsylvania
Amish. We need the old host of Longview for that one. We need Jeff Campbell here.
Jeff,
I could just sit back and have popcorn and listen to him talk about the history of certain games.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, that was for me. That was the most important detail to hit down. It was just to be able to stake a claim to this classic game.
It is yours as a Canadian. You claim this. It's your fault, as they say in Canada.
Well, if I want to take responsibility for it, then I have to apologize for it.
That's what are we at here? The drinking game for this episode is to take a sip every time that Norm apologizes, and I'm pretty sure that's 5
Let
or
me
6.
get my- let me
Right? We're
get
gonna hit
some.
double digits before we even hit 10 minutes.
I'm sorry, I didn't come up with this rule.
That's it. Take a sip.
Yeah, there we go. And if I say the word A, then you got a double hit. So
Oh, I'm not going to be sober by the end of this
Oh.
thing.
It's sad. That'll end our. We're not going to have any audience left. They're going to be on the floor before we're done here.
So I could go into the nuts and bolts of it. I mean, it's very similar to a dartboard or a curling house, rings, concentric rings into a center. The idea to Crokinole is you have a certain amount of discs, depending if you're playing 2-player or 4-player, and everybody has their own quadrant. And this is the rule that I cry at and laugh so much because it comes down to how many, if you've got Crokinole rules lawyers, and I know many of them.
Dad joke incoming. Dad joke incoming.
Oh yeah, once you sit down at the Crokinole board, once you sit down, the chair doesn't move, the board doesn't move, and there is what's called the one cheek rule. I kid you not. There are people that will basically lurch over the board and stare at you and watch and go, "Are you connected?" Yeah.
Are they keeping the cheek down though? That's the main thing. Because as soon as they, yep, hey,
good call.
Yep, I am actually a talking Crokinole board at the moment. I'm muffled because it's between me and my microphone.
Jeez.
But I'm showing our YouTube audience that may or may not come later the actual Crokinole board, what it looks like. It is a grand thing to hold in your hand, but it easily fits on most any table. So as Norm said, those concentric circles, and then the pegs in the middle and the circle in the middle. So just giving a little bit of a diagram to what you're saying there.
The rules, I mean, once I did some research, a lot of the times, I mean, how every game gets house ruled, but what I remember growing up for the rules of Crokinole were pretty much bang on to the official rules that I looked through on the World Crokinole tournament site. And but the only one that I immediately kind of went, whoa, well, that changes everything, was we used to try to hide behind a post so that your opponent had difficulties trying to navigate through those posts to try and contact you, which is one of the rules of a valid shot, is that if there is an opponent on the board, you have to strike them directly or strike them in a promoted kind of shot where you hit your own and that one directly hits the opponent. And if you miss, or if you don't, your disc comes off the board. And if you try to promote it and you hit yours to try and hit the other one and it doesn't, both of those come off the board. I knew that. The one that I was surprised to find out was if there's nobody on the board, a valid shot is you have to touch the 15 line or be inside the 15 house, which is inside that pegged area where the 20 hole is. And yeah, that changes a lot. I see.
So you didn't play with that then?
Oh yeah, with the 2-player, we'd always try to hide behind that post, and apparently that's an illegal shot. So that's going to change. That's going to change the dynamic of our family. Our family games are now going to be. I'm going to have to bolt down the table and bolt down the board because there's going to be a lot of people want to grab edges and flip that board.
No kidding there. Yeah, that certainly changes it quite a bit. And the only Crokinole I've known sounds like it is from the same source that you've gathered yours. So, you have how many? 12 discs that you're going to be shooting. You must shoot from your quarter. There's a baseline. As you said, one of the outermost concentric circle. You must be off of that. You must flick. This is a flicking game. And yes, you must flick the piece. You must keep at least one cheek down. This becomes relevant as you start trying to angle shots and because you're required to hit an opponent's piece, it absolutely changes the game. I just am wondering, so when you guys play, is usually the first shot just like a little dink that hides behind a post then on your own side of the board?
Well, that's what we used to do, but now that I've did my rules lawyer bit and found out that you have to be touching. Now, this is the part that it's so subjective because it says at least touching the 15 line or inside the 15 house. So that gray area of at least touching the line. I have family members that will like bring in precedents from 1862 with yeah. So I mean, it's definitely one of those situations where, you know, if you want to be particular, you better establish that, you know, when you sit down. And
I would say so. Yeah. What I always tell people, and I guess this is just based on the way that final scoring works, that if you're inside those pegs, because the innermost of the concentric circles has pegs around it. It has like 8 pegs, right?
Yes.
That spaced out around it in a circular sort of fashion, and you must be inside of that at the end of the game without touching any line to get 15 points.
Yeah. So anytime you touch a line, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, there's a drink, and now thanks for that, Norm. And now, what I always went off of is that if you were touching a line, you were considered in the outer. You know, if you were even barely touching that line, you're in the outer one. And so if you flick towards the middle and it was touching any part of the line, I always considered that was an invalid shot. So I don't know, I guess that I was more of the rules lawyer than anyone, but I was once again learning it fairly recently and learning it from the printed out rules that came with mine, which I believe are the official rules that you're referring to, just printed on a little bit of cardstock. So what is it that you were going to say there?
Well, anytime, I mean, the general rule is anytime that the disc is touching a line, it always gets scored the lower value.
Yes.
In regards to that end of round scoring. But I mean, aside from you know, just the standard straight ahead rules, when I kept looking and researching, I mean, everything has an origin, in my opinion, especially, you know, coming from countries that are like, I mean, in the grand historical span, you know, young countries like Canada, United States, that I mean, if you start looking back as far as Moncala, everything's going to have an origin. So I thought, well, where's this one coming from? And what I found, and I'll read it because it was so well written when I cut and pasted it, as my students would.
Plagiarism.
I'm not footnoting this as my own case. So it says the game that no doubt contributed to the arrival of crokinole seemed to be the 16th century British games of shovelboard, from which we get shuffleboard. The 17th century pub game shove ha'penny, and I'm serious when I say that, and the Victorian parlor game of squales. It also gives credit to a Burmese or East Indian carome, which seems like a logical ancestor to crokinole because of the similar flicking technique. I immediately went to YouTube, and I had never heard of this. I watched it. It is the coolest thing that I have seen in a while as regards to flicking. It reminded me of a combination of crokinole and snooker, like billiards, right? Because you've got it's a square board. You've got that same kind of concept as a center play area, but like snooker, you have your racked up, in this case, discs, and there's 4 holes in the corners. And it was basically like snooker, you're trying to pop your color into the corners, and each time that you drop a disc into the corner, you get to shoot again. I saw that and went, oh yay! There's another itch in my brain that needs to get scratched.
Having not seen that, is it a flick with the finger, or is absolute
flicking.
Okay.
And they had some interesting. I mean, as far as the crokinole, you know, flicking technique goes, they had some crazy side flicking shots that they would, you know, how in crokinole you get that velocity from having your thumb hold the tip of your finger. But on these side shots, they would use that same resistance when their finger is on the table, and then they would just like give a little hockey shot flick. And I mean, oh yeah, my brain instantly went, I know how to do that.
It's like when you see somebody hop and use English in billiards, you're like, ooh,
yeah,
you know, you've been playing this since you were real young, right? This is like part of your DNA.
Well, this game, like, I mean, when I was thinking about the conversation that we're going to have, I thought, I don't want to turn this into a nuts and bolts kind of, go through the user manual and describe the compositions of the boards. To me, and this is just who I am, to me, everything comes down to shared experience. And for me, this game has such a connection with my learned history from being 6 years old, at my grandparents' farmhouse, putting the crokinole board on the the footrest in the middle of the living room and cranking out a few games with the relatives, all the way to me now playing this and introducing this to my own kids. So it's to me, it's like how it's like a friend that you've had for a long time, that every once in a while it's like you put the board away for, there's times where I haven't touched a crokinole board in 2-3 years, and then all of a sudden someone says, "Hey, have you played this before?" And I just smile and go, that thing's paid my way through college. So yeah, and it's just one of those kind of, you smile and look at the crokinole board and go, "I remember you. Remember that last time where I fell asleep and I had discs stuck to my face?" Yeah, to me, it's the importance of this game is how it's been a fabric of me growing up. And
do you remember your first game of crokinole?
It's hard to say, because I mean, as far as memory goes, you just have these snapshot images. But I have kind of good memories of being a child, playing it with my grandparents, playing it with my dad. I have 2 older brothers, and of course, when you have older brothers, they turn every game into how can we punch each other. So we would drop a 20, and when you dropped a 20, you got to give a good good punch into the shoulder. And my brothers my brothers are 6 and 7 years older than me, and my oldest brother was an Olympic level gymnast. So and I attribute those beatings to why I was such a good lacrosse goalie in my heyday. So but yeah, I mean, to me, it's just every person, every culture is going to have that hobby that's past being a hobby, where it's just a fabric of how you socialize with your family.
Wow, you're the perfect guy to have on for this, for sure. And as you talk about that, I'm wondering, when am I going to schedule the Long View of Euchre? Because that is like, that one is at the core of my fabric. And it's just one that my family always played. So I get where you're going there, because to me, like, it's much more than a game. Like I know that back in my hometown, every Saturday night is a euchre tournament. Like that's just like, that's what you can do. It's like, well, do we don't have anything else to do? Then we're going to play euchre on Saturday nights. That's just what we do. So
and it's probably the same thing, where as you're playing, you're solving the world's problems, talking back and forth. And
yeah, I did the same thing with my grandparents playing canasta. Me and my friend would go see my grandma and grandpa. We just play canasta for hours, like every Saturday night.
And I mean, and you probably got to see such a great snapshot of your grandparents' personalities and things that they're behaving in that moment competitively or happily. You just get to have those kind of vignettes.
It'd be like they would, every time one of them would give us a chance to do a good play, they'd be like, "Oh, thanks, Mama Lou. Just give them the game. That's great." Just that kind of stuff going back and forth all night.
And that's when you learned king making.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah, a lot of these things, like, they were present in these old discussions, but since for us it wasn't about playing board games or playing tabletop, it was like we just played euchre, and it wasn't even something that you really suggested. It was just something that happened. So totally get where you're going with that.
And I mean, with at least with crokinole, there's not much learning curve that has to happen. You just have to watch. Yeah, it's observe and imitate, right? And then after that is just fine tuning your technique and I mean, every kid's gonna have something to coach somebody else about. Oh no, you got to try it this way. You got to try it this way. Or so, yeah. I mean, I've never played. Is it euchre or euchre?
Euchre.
Euchre. Okay.
That's what I say. Euchre.
Is that like a trick-taking game?
It is. Yeah, it's a partner trick-taking game, 4 players, and yeah, you're. It's kind of like Pitch or 500.
Like I've heard the name before, but I've never played the game. But to me, it sounds like that same family social situation that. I mean, in class, we've been talking about this, that the advent of technology has taken that away from the family dynamic, I think, is that ability to sit face to face.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that. When I took Kate out to do our epic day of board gaming, which was like 10 to 6, afterwards, she's like, Dad, I'm glad we got away from all the electronics. And I was really able to concentrate and interact with people and have a good time. I'm like, oh, I've instilled something in my child. I'm so happy.
Yeah, that's a pretty big win for you, TC, man. Way to go.
Well, and I mean, as you just said, that she was able to, slow things down and focus. My wife just laughs at me and kind of looks at my board games and goes, "Well, I guess that's your riddling." And I mean, to laugh
better
about
than my wife. My wife, I mean, I guess it's a similar reference, but it's like, no, this is your autism spectrum right here. You're on the spectrum there.
Yeah.
I suppose.
My wife just gets back at me by crushing me at a game. Like that game of John Company where she just freaking crashed the company and won the game. I was like, holy cow. And you do finances for us? I need to take a closer look at this stuff. You're this good at this game.
Nice. So let's bring it back to the actual experts here that you've mentioned. Like Crokinole, one thing that I've kind of seen and heard of, this is one of those types of hobbies that seems to have people who take it extremely seriously. And when I say that, I'm kind of referring to my first experience ever seeing a Crokinole board was like seeing actually the same exact carrying case that I'm currently demonstrating here. It's a gigantic yellow Mayday carrying case.
That's a parachute.
Yeah, basically is. And this dude at Origins, my first ever gaming convention in 2013, he was wearing it on his back. He was like just carrying it around, just.
It's like Captain
America. My dad having absolutely no shame, and I don't think that's typical of Iowans. Maybe it is. I don't know. You be the judge. If you know me, maybe that's the case. But my dad, having no shame, just walked up this guy he'd never met, and that was one of the 2 board games he played at Origins. Was this dude that played Crokinole with my dad. Clearly had other plans, but could not say no to my dad, and that was my dad was immediately he just loved it, and he wanted to play game after game after game. And I think that's kind of a common reaction. So there are folks, though, that are so into this game that, this is what I would call, yes, it's a portable game. You can bring it around fairly easily, but it is definitely, because of its dimensions, not something that you're going to stick inside your game box.
Oh, yeah. No, this isn't just a, fold it up and let's go to the next venue.
Mm-hmm. But it just, this is... Norm, let's call this what it is here. We are talking about a tabletop game. We're talking about a dexterity tabletop game that has this huge respect in the hobby to the point where at one point it was in the Board Game Geek Top 100. It was really high up, and I'm pretty sure it's still standing there. And it's standing alone. There is not other games that do this like this. And if I could describe a game of Crokinole in a word, it would just be raw adrenaline. Because you don't think of it like that until you actually sit down. And because it is so entirely dependent on your skill, what I would call the old-fashioned video game twitch, everything about it is, it's done by fractions of a second, by fractions of a Newton of force. It has that next level, right? And I mean, you learned it because otherwise you got punched. Especially you got punched by a 6-year senior, by 6 years your senior.
I learned the Spartan way, I guess.
All alone in the woods.
But no, you're absolutely right. I see a lot of people when they dial in this game and it comes down to, you know, they don't want to lose, it's like watching someone play golf. They just they focus on their shot. They're looking through their shot. The other person on the board doesn't exist. All they see is that one, you know, that one angle that they have to make. And I mean, even myself, when I'm playing Crokinole, I mean, I just love to play recreationally. But when I have, you know, a friend or a cousin taunt me, and it's time to, like, you know, drop the gloves and bring your A game, I'll sit down and I'll get all beautiful mind, and I'll see, like, the angles off the post, and I'll try and do a double and drop a cookie kind of thing. Oh yeah. And of course everyone's like, oh no, he's getting into the zone, and it's just, you know, shh.
Yeah, it's the golf crowd. It is.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's like little gallery claps after you know, do a triple and clear the board. And
it's tough to view the board, but you still must keep your distance, because if you hunch over like that very poor etiquette right there. You know, you are being a poor spectator.
I remember having one of my aunts, you know, like a little French Canadian aunt, very kind of proper, and you would start to lean in and she would stop and she'd go, "Don't vulture the board." And and I would just kind of like, oh, that's, you know, and
there's a word for it.
Oh yeah, because I'd be looking. I wanted to make the shot, and I'd be watching, and of course, my face is right in this whole, you know, visual perspective alley that she's trying to isolate, and it's kind of, hey, vulture, quit lurching. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. There's another one.
Wake up, everybody.
So it really, I think that one of the main things that provokes this sort of, you know, absolute tunnel vision, narrow focus, you know, like all of your resources mentally and physically are being channeled into this one flick. And I know that sounds like a whiff of a punchline there, but that's what it is. I think that is largely generated by the pegs. I think if you take out the pegs, you take out the game, because these 8 pegs are, you know, they're like the gods of Crokinole. They give and they take.
I swear they reach out sometimes and, like, just catch an edge with an elbow kind of thing, just because they hate me. Like the dice hate you. Those posts, yes. Man. Oh.
It's the pegs.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they're a mirage. Is there 9 pegs on this board? How many pegs you got on this board?
Oh, I mean, it's just the same way of, I mean, just to bring it over to the other sport, just like a golfer, he's looking on the fairway and there's water on either side, and all he says in his head is, "Don't put it in the water. Don't put it in the water. Don't put it in the water." Yeah.
Yep. Not to the pegs, because if you've ever hit directly onto a peg, it's usually, I would say that it happens very frequently. So frequently, I shouldn't feel this way. But when I hit into a peg, it almost always just caravine, you know, just straight off into the edge, and I feel absolute shame.
It's the same sound that a basketball hits when it clanks a rim and you just chucked a brick at the hoop. It's just this kind of like back in your face sound, and you just have to sit back and apologize first.
Yes, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I sucked on that shot.
So, you making a lot of references here to sports, because this really is that type of sport that you can just invest in, like I said, mentally and physically. Now, at the same time, though, I'd like to make a bit of a comparison here to bowling. I know that you've mentioned golf, and it's like the golf bowling. For me, my dad brought me up telling me that it was either golf or bowling. I could have one or the other, but not both. And, you know, this is my dad who chose bowling. But when you play Crokinole, there is essentially the equivalent of a strike.
Oh, yeah.
Right? There's a strike in this game. Like, when you start this game, you have something to aim for that is not simply, you know, to put a piece on the board that your opponent can do anything about. Like, you are able to get a 20, and that is because of that circle in the middle that's just barely any bigger than the disc, but you can put it right in there, and then you've got 20 points that they can't touch. You actually remove the disc from the board, and I don't know what you do, but I usually take it from the board and then put it on top of the scoreboard to remind myself that this is a 20. So
We usually put it on the rail, but there's so much kind of by accident bumping of the board that this, keeps. Yeah. So, but I mean, to go back to what you were saying about the whole focus thing, I remember listening to a game tech by Jeff Engelstein when he talked about the yips. And coming from a lacrosse background, being a goalie, I mean, I completely connected with that idea of just stay relaxed, stay loose, don't think about it, just, let the practicing take over and just do it. And in Crokinole, oh man, there's so many times where you're lining up and you're going, okay, I got it. And then all of a sudden you have some finger flick and it goes flying into the next, time zone. And you just,
because you know what entered into your brain? Doubt.
Doubt.
My greatest enemy in playing any sport. Doubt. That last minute, is it really the right shot? Boing.
Yeah. Do I shoot now? Do I shoot now? Do I shoot now? Do I shoot now? Yeah, I've been there.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, TC, you, with all this talking about it, does this even itch a little part of your brain?
I've bowled. So do I get to play Crokinole? You said there was a choice. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
No. Yeah, I mean, yeah. This is one of those games I've seen people play. I mean, I go to conventions, and at least our local convention. I see this played quite a bit, and the people when they play it is absolutely a riot. Just watching people play this thing. I mean, they just really, really get into it. It's really fun to watch. I don't know if I could ever make that much of a spectacle myself, but I'm certainly willing to try.
The skill players are such a joy to watch because they could be like MIT physicists the way they've got those angles figured out. And
yeah,
go ahead.
It's like I watch them ricochet and stuff. It's pretty amazing if you can find some skilled players to do it. I agree. Yeah.
So right now, this is a very fortuitous time to be talking about Crokinole specifically because it is during the Winter Olympics right now that are going on in Pyeongchang in South Korea. And I just seen several Canadian athletes compete in not Crokinole, curling. The actual, good old curling. And that was the small amount of research that I've done in the past, like looking up is I've heard two things about Crokinole, and that's that it's similar to curling and that it's like shuffleboard in the round. That's what I've heard. That is like, that's another sort of like quotationed phrase that describes Crokinole to the uninitiated. You'd imagine a game of shuffleboard generally played on a long, a rectangular, but a very long board that generally is like a basement or a bar game because it takes a ton of space, requires upkeep in terms of dusting, like with some sort of a wax powder, the board and everything. Between those two games, like when you watch, I'm sure that you were tuned in to the curling on the Winter Olympics, right, Norm? That was, was your family. That was this last Saturday, right? And me and my brother, when that comes on, usually like to discuss whether or not those people have day jobs. That's like that's our fun in watching the Winter Olympics. Just like my wife, like what are the Olympics there for? Well, it's to judge a bunch of people you've never heard of. That's what they're there for. But you watched curling for a totally different engagement. Now, compare, if you wouldn't mind, Crokinole to curling and shuffleboard.
Okay, that's something I've never done before. Okay, so compare Crokinole to curling. So the curling thing absolutely makes sense because, I mean, in the dynamic of curling, if you take away the whole, granite rock that weighs this, as much of a small Volkswagen. But if you take like what they're targeting on, it comes back to like, I mean, just that idea of put thing in whole game, like golf, basketball, hockey, put the thing in the goal. With curling, it's a dartboard. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, it's basically a target area, and you're like archery, but instead of an arrow, you're hucking a piece of granite on pebbled ice, and you're hoping that you've got the right weight, and the curling comes from the idea that when you let that rock go, you're giving it a turn left or right with your hand, and this pebbled ice surface will catch like a curveball. with baseball. It's the threads that the air catches that allow it to do that dynamic movement. And it's the same case with friction and the way the rock is spinning and how fast it's going. And I mean, I tried curling once, and after face planting on the ice about 7 times, I said, I'm watching it from the lounge. I was about as graceful as Bambi.
Yeah, it's fascinating though. It's fascinating. It's like this sport that has positions, and all of them seem like they're like expressly made for the comic relief of the Winter Olympics. Like, you have the people with the brooms, and or what are they, like the things where they're sweeping it, sweepers?
Well, I mean, historically it was like brooms, like corn brooms, and then now it's gotten so high tech that it's down to these Teflon, or I'm not even going to say anything because curling fans are just going to like tie into me going, what do you mean you don't know what this is made out of? Sorry. Yeah. But oh yeah, I mean, it's the sport has gotten so high tech with the tools of that sport that but I mean, it comes down to, like anything, how you interact with that rock, the same as in Crokinole. How, like I said, that muscle flick of the finger, there's times where you twitch and it's like it moves half an inch, and you show much shame. But
well, I appreciate that comparison. Now in Crokinole though, it's like darts if you could throw a dart that displaced your opponent's darts, right? So I mean that's more of a Crokinole or Shuffleboard feature that curling has than so to say, just to put the ball in the hole, right? Because there is no central hole to score in curling, right? That's a Crokinole feature.
Curling, curling is a lot of the takeout stuff too, where you'll try to have a shot that counts a point, and then you'll put rocks in well ahead of it as blockers, so that they'll have to do a really good curl around that blocker to get back into the house and hit the rock. So I mean, I can't really think of many other games that have that idea of take out your opponent to leave yourself in a advantageous position.
Well, I think maybe Shuffleboard, which was my other comparison, just because it's Shuffleboard, I feel like is similar to curling, obviously on a much smaller scale. Like it's like curling is what you play when you're on the ice, and then Shuffleboard is what you play when you're at the bar, and then Crokinole is what you play when you're in your game room or wherever it is, or your dining room table. I'm kind of wondering though, is it so much of like if you have the ability to play Shuffleboard, why play Crokinole? And I keep coming back to like, honestly, in some ways, I think that Shuffleboard, though its pieces are really nice to, it's a good Shuffleboard table that's been well kept, is a real gem, a real treat to be able to play on. But there are elements there. What's that? It's
like 14. A good one is like 14 feet, 12 feet long.
Oh yeah. Well, real long. It is. It takes up a ton of space, and then you get those old ones that are in bars that haven't upkept them, and they're just not the same quality. I think though that like there are elements in Crokinole that none of those games feature. I honestly feel like when it comes down to it, Shuffleboard's a really simple game. It's similar to curling, but it's like curling if you took out 99% of the board. You've got only a small little bit of play area. And, that seems like there's a bit more to it. And obviously, it's only one player. There's not, there's not the sweepers, which is the most hilarious part of curling. If you've never seen it done before, I highly recommend that you got to go watch curling. You got to go see it. It's one of those
I love watching curling with the other brooms in front of it going. Yeah, it's great.
I really hope that's on, Voyager 2 that's now floating outside of our solar system there for any other life to be able to see. I want them, if they see nothing else, watch the sport of curling. Watch people engage in the sport of curling, and then you will understand human beings at such a deep level that they can just come here and take us all over, I think.
Like, I mean, I tried mocking that with my cousins who are huge curling fans and saying, what did you need to clean, like sweep the hallway as this thing? And they went, they just looked at me and dismissed my humor and went straight down to the science about how the friction heats up the ice and how that will affect the turn. And I just looked and went, I'm only here to mock. I'm not here to learn.
I can't participate. You've already taken this to the level I'm uncomfortable with.
Yeah, I've got something else to do other than listen to learning.
Oh, I totally respect it here. This is a respectful mocking from me. So yes, I probably the same as yours. So maybe I'm going to apologize here, but I'm trying not to. I think our audience is already going to have enough time dealing with your apologies. So
sorry about that.
Oh, another drink.
Yep, there we go. So now we've talked a little bit about its comparison to shuffleboard and curling as far as that goes. I think though, like here we've got the surface of the board is, in my opinion, like this is a flicking game. The surface here is just of the utmost importance. Like it seems like one of those things where, it has to be playable. Like to me, if a board is not in good condition, it is actually impacting gameplay in like a really negative way. It'd be like having a torn card in a deck of cards.
I've had so many times where we've sat down to play some Crokinole, and then you I don't know. I mean, how other players play, but the moment I have my discs, I'm putting them on the table and I'm giving them a spin to see which side's cup up, cup down. Oh yeah, because if you get the cup up, then you've got that one small little piece of the disc that's the friction point on the board, and it theoretically should slide a lot smoother. And then if you flip it over, it's mostly the perimeter of the disc that's sliding, and that's going to, I mean, on a bad surface, if you have the wrong side, you're trying to push this thing through oatmeal. And it's just a bad experience.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. So the surface is really important. Now, there are different levels. I mean, if somebody is listening to this for the very first time and is like, "Ooh, this is interesting," how would you rate? Have you ever seen or played on a board that's like a mass-produced? Is there a cheapo knockoff board here for Crokinole, or what do you think?
In my history of playing, I've played on, everything from close to cardboard to burled maple with 8 layers of finish, and and then of course the proper compound for tournament compound for like that, like the shuffleboard compound that they put on to help the surface.
Really?
Oh,
actually, people do that. I've never played on a compound board. I've never played like that. I feel like that'd be like playing in a clay tennis court, which I've also never done. Everything around here is hard courts.
The tournament rules, and it's very they pay a lot of attention. It's they say that it's only the judges that are allowed to put some of the playing surface on. Most of it has to stay in the ditch, like in shuffleboard, where most of that compound's in the ditch, and you just sprinkle it on the board. But I mean, to me, it always comes down to who are you playing with and why are you playing? And if you, I've played on a bad 1972 Coleco, Mattel kind of, like I said, close to cardboard, and had great games because of the company I was keeping.
Sure.
All the way up to, playing on some really nice boards and having, again, back to that whole shared experience, having some great games, but necessarily not having to do with the Crokinole, but having to do with what that activity created for the four of us.
Absolutely. Oh, and you just mentioned 4-player, which I want to move on to that. I want to talk about that topic for sure. But I wanted to address what you just mentioned, which is that like so much of this is about the company you play with. And I think that's because this is really one of the first times that the Long View has ever, in what I've experienced as a listener and as a host, seen as a parlor game that is like high up in the Board Game Geek rankings. Here you have like the intersection of tabletop and parlor games, right? Like foosball, billiards, these are ping pong. These backgammon. Are all parlor games. Backgammon?
Just from my growing up, I would categorize all of those because just that's how I grew up, where you had cribbage, chess, backgammon.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like when I say parlor games, I mean like your dad has a game room, your dad has this thing in the basement, this is like, it's going to be weird, right? I mean, I guess Daniel doesn't have this idea of a parlor, but for me, like I would go to my grandfather's house, and my grandfather had a foosball table right next to a ping pong table. That was like the parlor idea. And I would go to my friend's house. Maybe that's an Iowa thing. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's not. I don't know.
Well, I know what you're talking about, but I think it comes down to like what your experience in this hobby is differing to mine, and we could talk about the different geography, the different cultural influence, the different upbringing. I mean, agrarian versus urban, no, but I mean, from Saskatchewan, we're a rural province, and I'm not too sure what Iowa's like, but it's
very rural. I think that you actually live in Saskatoon, which is a much larger urban conglomerate than we have in Iowa, and that makes us kind of unique. Like I would compare Saskatoon to like Omaha, which I'm fairly close to Omaha, but like Omaha is like the only urban area in the entirety of the state of Nebraska, whereas like Iowa is bizarre in that yes, we have a capital that has the most people, like Des Moines, but it's like you're talking a third to half the size of Saskatoon, maybe even smaller than that. But like Saskatoon is like all of the people in the province of Saskatchewan. That's like you're talking everybody else is they live out in the sticks. Whereas in Iowa, I feel like most of Iowa is the sticks. So I'm not really sure how much that just, I grew up in a town of 10,000. I now live in a town that's not much more than 10,000. It's just, that's my experience. And I don't know, like foosball tables though, like we had one of those at our skating rink in town. To me, it's like the type of thing that you might encounter at a bar, right? Yeah. I guess that's maybe what to say, not parlor games, but like if you go to a bar, you could see a foosball table, right? Like you could see a billiards table, you could see a shuffleboard table. Well, to me, I've never seen a crokinole before, but that's because crokinole has that sort of portable aspect that it's like, that's my table. It doesn't necessarily have that, like, this is the bar's table. You're playing on the bar's table unless it's a crokinole bar, which I'm pretty sure you only have up there in Canada. And I'm sure that's a thing there.
I've never heard of that, but that's a really good idea.
We got board game cafes and crokinole bars.
I'm going to say sorry because I'm going to steal that idea.
It's yours to steal right there, man.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That I mean, in certain situations, even in this province, that you don't see crokinole boards often, but then when you do, you start to connect. Like you connect right away with the person. It's one of those weird kind of secret handshake clubs. You see someone with a crokinole board and they see you look over and smile at a shot, and I know why why don't you come over here and let's
well, does it have that sort of interaction that I would associate with those same types of parlor games where like everybody has like that friend group that all plays the game, but there's that one guy in the group that's like has just the knack for it, right? That's like he's
the Bobby Fischer.
yes, the Bobby Fischer, where it's like like everybody else when they play for fun, but then if he's in the room, it's like I like we could keep playing this, or we could go watch his game, and it's like I feel like it's like your regional champ. So like of your friend group, you've got that regional champ that's just amazing. I have this buddy Danny who just. Like he grew up in that same sort of situation. Dad has a pool table in the basement, which made his family just slightly more fun than mine, which just had the foosball table. But that just led to his dad being this amazing, like pool player that was fun to watch. And Danny himself just, he could do the foosball where he could use like the angled shot where he actually just like would, be able to get the right spin, and he could pass the ball. Passing the ball in foosball is like that takes this level of coordination that a rube like me has no chance at getting. And I feel like that's when I watch somebody ricochet in crokinole, or just even like when I see any bit of like a flick that makes it through the pegs. I feel like there's a certain amount of like, he hasn't hit a peg yet today. Like, that's one of those things where you know, everybody be sitting there with their folded arms around the crokinole table. You know, like, you walk up, you're new, and the guy next to you just says, he hasn't a peg yet. and then now you have a reason to watch. You know, everybody's watching. Yeah. Everybody's intently focused on, like, is he going to hit a peg this time? You know, to a certain extent, yes, there's that strike right down the middle of getting that circle in the middle, but then, you know, just the shame that you feel of smoking a peg, and just the immediate you know, gutter ball, that I would call it, effect of just hitting right into the corner. Yeah, go ahead.
There's this with a staff that I used to work with. Lunchtime, we used to race back to the staff room to try and get a seat at the crokinole. We had 2 crokinole tables in the staff room, and it was
at your high school.
Yeah, and it was like a
you
sprint.
Have a parlor room.
Oh yeah,
high school break room.
And
wow,
I mean,
actually go there. That is hilarious. I'm gonna suggest that. I'm gonna suggest that to my staff. That is awesome.
It was hilarious because it used to get to the point where we were so engaged, and our skill level got so so advanced so fast that we'd sit down and play games like it would be like, you know, a chess game where you're slapping the timer, because it'd be like bang, take out, bang, take out, bang, take out. You scored 5, you scored 0, bang, take out, bang, take out. And it was like you'd have a bite of your sandwich as you're watching this, and you'd be like, is it my turn? Is it my turn? Is it my turn? Okay. And it, like, yeah, like what you're saying, you would sit back and go, I don't want to say anything because this is the best game I've seen all month, and I just want to sit and watch how they negotiate, you know, these angles, kind of thing. But this is what you're going to love the most. The one thing that I'm embarrassed and proud of at the same time is the science teacher thought we could take this one step further. So he went and got his little velocity sensors, set them up on a table to see who had the hardest crokinole shot. And I swear we clocked them up to about 30 miles an hour.
Wow.
Oh yeah, but you've got your fingers, your forearms shaking as your thumb's holding back your finger, and you hit that thing so hard that you get a blood blister underneath your fingernail, kind of thing. But
yeah,
you're walking away shaking it off, going, I'm good. What's my time?
Do you ever switch hit, or for you, do you always pick a specific finger? Do you ever, you know, is it the index? I'm generally a middle finger because that's got the most force, the most potential.
Well, I had a joke in my head. It all depends which shot is. Just F it. I don't know. I'm usually like the first finger. I'm all about lock and load and let that.
I feel like I get more control that way, but I just, you know, it's more power.
Okay, well, I was not going to let this out, but you know how everybody has their own little strategy. I'm a big fan of, and this comes from lacrosse, where it's like, you want that ball to go where you want it to go, then you better be pointing in your follow through. So I'm a big fan of locking up that first finger, and then with your other 3 fingers, you're pointing at the spot in space on the board where you want it. Oh yeah,
that was right there. That was from the master. That is a trailer bit from the upcoming Norm LePage's Guide to Crokinole on Blu-ray.
Apology after apology.
Yes. Apology number 1. You're just gonna phrase it like 10 apologies to get you good at crokinole.
Yeah. Lesson 1. Sorry.
I'm sorry for hitting it in the middle.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so great. So, oh gosh, when it comes to bumpers, we've already talked about how the bumpers are just the central sort of obstacle there, you know, aside from your opponent's pieces, you know, that this sort of the force system of interaction where you have to hit your opponent's pieces that requires you, you know, to actually play your opponent, not, you know, where the opponent's at, and not just play the board. These bumpers, though, have different qualities to them. You know, let's go back to our science teacher illusion here. You know, like the actual molecular composition of each of the bumpers has an impact. Like, I showed my crokinole board before the recording of this episode, and the first question Norm had for me was, so are those brass? And I was I wasn't
Was it
sure.
solid steel?
I thought,
Was it
oh
brass?
no, I've already been outed. I'm done. I'm finished. I can't talk at all.
No.
But no, I like there's bumpers can be, like totally composed of metal. They can have a rubber outside to them, and they, as you have done, can have sort of a jerry-rigged bit of a quality where you can what'd you say you did to your bumpers, Norm?
We basically cut little pieces of surgical tubing and just sleeve them over top the pegs.
Mm-hmm. And that's because everybody has a preference, right? Is this a Saskatoon Crokinole thing where you prefer a bit more of like bounce, I guess?
I don't know if it's a regional thing or if it's a me thing going, okay, this is what it does. What can it do now? I've been known to take apart a lot of things and go, well, it says it only takes 9 volts. Let's put a bigger battery on and see what happens.
Yes. Let's put it in there, and then a couple of pops, a little bit of smoke, and
smoke test. Unplug it. Yeah.
But that's when you go grab your duct tape, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Duct tape, handyman's tool.
Well, like when you're talking about the posts, and again, I don't even consider myself to be, the master level Crokinole. I mean, like I said, it's just been part of my experience from being a kid and all through my life. But when you mentioned about posts behaving differently, man, there's some times where I'll be so particular. I'll just give the posts a little touch and a nudge to see how secure they are to the board, because I mean, it's like that whole Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope thing. Sometimes you'll hit a post, and if it's not rigid and if it's not rigidly connected to the board, it'll be like hitting a pillow, and it's not going to do what it
just stops right there. That would kill me, right? But at the same time, I once played on a Mayday board, which is like the cheaper US boards you can get here. Generally, a Crokinole board from Mayday will cost you $75, whereas a handmade one, you're talking at least 3 figures, if not double that, triple that, $400+ sometimes. Those tend to not have these rubber bumpers like Mayday had. When I played with my brother, we just, as soon as anything touched a bumper, it was immediately out of play. It just didn't feel like there was much to do with that. So I suppose, whereas you felt like you wanted a little bit more, and I do think I've seen that maybe before, like the transparent surgical tubing and then having that. I think I've seen that before, and it's not, as I recall, it's not like disruptive to the game like I felt like the Mayday bumpers were, because those Mayday bumpers just had me, it was like it didn't matter if you hit one, boing.
There's something to be said about those type of posts that are active, because all of a sudden that inside turns into like a game of Plinko, because that thing is just like rebounding all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just coming back to other sports, it's like golf. You're going to play a different course. You're going to, the greens are different. I mean, you sit down at the board and you assess the board, and you have a quick determination as to what kind of game you're going to have.
Certainly. I mean, every board is going to have a different experience, and there are specific rules to be able to play this with 3 players and 2 players now, or 4. I say it's generally a 2-player game. I feel like in most cases, either a 2 or a 4-player game, because they can both be played on the same board. But there are 3-player specific Crokinole boards. Do you have any experience with any of what I've talked about?
I have played mostly 2-player, 4-player. I've seen the 3-player boards, and I mean, it's the same concept. It's just that instead of you have your quadrant, you just have your third of that radius of the circle, and everybody has their own equally divided part of that board. So I mean as far as game theory goes, you're still competing head to head, but now you've just included one other person. There's no team play, but right away in my head, I could see variants coming where it could be like 1 against all kind of thing, or and again, I have flashbacks of my brothers and having them both beat the snot out of me after you dropping a cookie. And but and in doing this research, I was so happily surprised that I'll have to send you the link. There's a company that makes crokinole boards that made a 2-player version. And how to describe it is if you take the whole circle of a crokinole board and you cut the left and right side off so that you have like an hourglass shape with, and so you've got this hourglass shape. And on where the hips are of the hourglass, that's where the ditch is with all of the discs that'll come out of the house, kind of thing. Immediately, my carpenter brain kicked in and went, "I have to make one and try this."
Well, that would be.
I got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's really interesting because playing a 2-player game on the 4-player board, because it's a circle. If you end up with a piece that's kind of out in the outer region, as soon as a piece touches the outer perimeter, that last one, it's gone. Yeah. But if you have something that's kind of bordering that, in the right spot, it could be a very strategic piece. But because you're allowed to, use the one cheek rule and move to the very corner of your space on the perimeter, it can definitely be a lot more of a, like sometimes you get a really easy shot. You just got this is a direct shot. All I've got to do is just cross this, I don't have to actually navigate the pegs.
Yeah.
Because navigating the pegs is really the nuance in the game, is what I would say, at least.
The first thing that I thought of when I saw this board is how surgical a game you have to bring to this table. Because, and the one that just made my brain fire off was that it is 12 inches by 24 inches. 12 inches by 26 inches. So they've left the house tournament rule size, but then the 10 ring and the 5 ring, they've shortened it up a little bit. So you're basically playing this surgical game inside the 15 house and the 20 center hole.
So everything is just much smaller scale. Wow.
They've just tightened up those two, because typically the outside rings are 4 inches and 4 inches, and then you have that 15-point house. So they've just shrunken the 5 ring and they've shrunken the 10 ring and left this, kind of out of context, larger than context, larger than the ring's house. But the first thing that I thought of was, this is all about surgically removing players from that house part and pitching them out to the ditch.
So a totally different game. I mean, that's a drastic change, though. That's something that I've actually never even witnessed before.
I have never seen it. And the first thing I thought of was, this is good. This could be a lot of fun. Because you could take it to any game night now, rather than hauling some hubcap from a Kenworth over your shoulder kind of thing.
It's actually small enough to be able to be portable. Wow.
Yeah, so that appealed to me, because it's now you can get talk about the cult. You can get a lot more people dialed into this flicking game that has such a depth of history.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So it's got this huge history to it, and we've talked about some other similar games. In our chat, Murr has brought up Crokinole.
Oh yeah, now I got to give kudos to Winnipeg, Manitoba, because I believe the first evidence that I saw of this was an article on my phone. And it was called Crokinole, where they take the crokinole concept, but put it on a ice surface outside and use curling stones.
Mm-hmm. Well, very relevant for my question from earlier, because there are elements to crokinole that curling does not have that would change the game fundamentally.
Oh yeah, and in Saskatoon here, for their Winterfest, they paid homage to Winnipeg, and they put up their own. And I went and had a look at it and took some video footage and put it on our Twitter account. And they had a sign that said, if you'd like to play, contact this person. And I had to suppress the delinquent in me, because I wanted to go out there and I wanted to start
Just play it there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Be like, you know what? Better to ask for forgiveness than permission, because I want to
precisely.
play.
If you just wanted to play the game, I mean.
But yeah, I want to get in a game before a joke's coming up. I want to get in a game before the summer comes, so that's probably going to be in another 12 months.
Is summer coming this year? I forget. You have the Game of Thrones winners up there, don't you?
We've got like drive-through summer. It's like, hey, it's spring. Whoop, it goes by. Hey, it's fall.
Yeah, just skip right there. No, it looked really cool from what I can remember from that picture. It's an interesting concept, and I think though that shows that there's an acknowledgement that Crokinole has something special to it that isn't even present in these other parlor games, quote unquote, that I've mentioned, because this really is like, it's something totally different. Yes, it's one that is much more possible for that mass market consumer base and much more accessible than, say, actual curling. And even shuffleboard's hard to come by. Shuffleboard's hard to come by and hard to maintain. So, but I think that that Crokinole sounds quite interesting. So maybe someday we'll all get a chance to play that together in July sometime up there in Saskatoon.
Here's something to ponder. When I looked at that, and it's right outside one of the more popular coffee shops in town. I was looking at that, and in the area it's a very artistic area. And I thought, much like the whole art thing, do board games reflect life, or does life reflect board games? Because like you said, this Crokinole, this game is, I mean, it's part of my identity, or part of my Canadian identity. And so does this game have such an impact on us because it's been there because of we're locked inside for so much time in the winter time, and it's the least offensive thing that the family can play together, and then that social dynamic which comes back and reflects the game. I was thinking about that, going, well, what has more influence on each other? And I mean, you could start thinking about games like This War of Mine, which is that other side of it, where the board games are reflecting life.
Yeah, definitely. Like when you get more of a storytelling game that's based on, like you said, like this sort of event and a creative interpretation of life itself. Whereas I definitely think there are times when you can start to sort of see, and maybe it's because, Norm, I think it's because you're a little bit too attached to the Riddlin pump there. I think you need to kind of turn down the dial, because
time to switch to decaf.
Yeah, you got to play on the mini board. You got to play some Ice Cool. You got to cool yourself down with Ice Cool. So
I want to play that game.
Yeah. Oh, you haven't tried it yet?
I have not tried it.
Well,
I saw.
Go ahead. Have a quick thing to say about it, and that is that I think it's perfect for what it's going to do for families and whatnot. But it's a flicking game, right? It's a flicking game that has essentially, imagine if everybody controlled a single Crokinole piece, but that Crokinole piece, by virtue of the way it's designed, was able to have jumps. Jumping is not a thing that's in Crokinole. As a matter of fact, it's one of the rules that if you flick it so hard that it contacts the outer rim and then bounces back, if it totally clears the gutter and then comes right back in, that is supposed to get like a stern reprimand. I'm pretty sure that is cheekily written into the rules.
That's like arcing a bowling ball and landing it in the middle of the lane.
So with Ice Cool, though, I like the piece. I like that it's different and interesting. I think that also because of where you hit it, because it is this sort of imbalanced circle, circle with a little thing on top, a little lighter place on top, you end up being able to spin it and get it to do much easier hooks. Not impossible to do in Crokinole, but definitely difficult to do given the scope of the game. I think that most people I see shooting in Crokinole are doing it in straight lines.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. However, here's my biggest gripe about it. It is a game that is being played, like you've mentioned earlier, on a strip of cardboard. Like, it doesn't matter that much. If we're talking about, playing with the right group, it can be fine. But you're talking about taking a strip of cardboard, then taking a thin layer of paste and pasting a cover over that, because it's all made to look like a school, from the top down. And that's where it really kind of bothers me, is that I feel like I'm playing on this, there's paste underneath here. This is, it's going to start warping. It's already warping because it's cardboard. I mean, think about it. How many games behind you there, Norm, are a perfect, geometrically perfect rectangular prism? It's like when the box bows, like literally, if this game had come to me with a dented box, it would have made it unplayable. It would have vastly impacted the gameplay.
Well, because the box is the board, from what I understand.
It is. It's the game surface. And that's, I think, where it gets a little bit problematic. I mean, this is the same thing I come back to with the game Rampage, which involved a pretty pure form of flicking for your movement. There was different type, and there was the gross, like, you blow onto the board. We're talking here dexterity games in general. I think that in a board game form, a dexterity game, the pieces are the mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
It is so important that they are good. And that's why I think, you're talking Crokinole. Like, if you just played Crokinole on, something that was printed on the back of a cereal box and a couple of quarters or pennies, like, it is the experience is totally different. Like, to me, this, for it to really be, as you've mentioned, Norm, it depends on who your audience is. It depends on who your gaming group is, right? If you're playing and it's just silly fun, who cares? And that's why I think Ice Cool is fine, because it's generally intended as a kid's game. Crokinole can be both, though. It really can be both. And it's not like kids are going to play on a nice Crokinole board and be like, I want this to be weird, and I want my piece to not go where I flick it. This is too predictable.
This is interesting because I want to pick both of your brains if you've played any of these games. I think the Catacombs series.
Yes, that'd be a similar thing, but I've not played it.
It's that same, from what I've seen and what I've researched. It's that same flicking mechanism of put it in a straight line, but there's a theme now. It's like, I think Catacombs has this dungeon diving theme where you're fighting monsters kind of thing. And what is the latest one? Not that I'm a huge fan of zombie stuff, and I've never played Dead of Winter, but the Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter.
I played Flick 'em Up.
Yeah, I've never played Flick 'em Up either. That's another one where I'm gonna have to unmelt my credit card to go and find some of those.
One of the more interesting flicking games one of the more interesting flicking games that I enjoy is Ascending Empires, because it's a flicking 4X game.
I have never heard of that.
That one's it's hard to find, but it's a 4X game, except when you fly your ships around, you're flicking discs, and you got to flick it next to a planet, but it has to get close enough to it, you're trying to get into orbit, right? You're like, flick, you got to just time it just right, or hit the planet and bounce back off. You're like, crap. That's a pretty interesting little spin on flicking games, I think.
Well, the thing, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, sorry.
I'm so proud of you right now. The thing with Crokinole is there is absolutely no theme. It's all mechanism. I mean, if I was to compare that with games that I don't like because they're just mechanism, Splendor.
You and Trent.
But I mean, the certain board games that I play that if I identify that it's just a mechanism, I am so uninterested in it. But then you come back to Crokinole, and it's targeting. It's basically who can target the best. And
well, it's basically like you've compared it to sports, right? How many of those sports have theme? Like, what's the theme of basketball, right?
Yeah. See how much noise your sneakers can make on a hardwood floor.
Yeah, the sneaker screeches.
But
So it's interesting that you bring this up though, because it is like, this is a sport. It's like a competitive activity that's, it sort of bypasses all of those, it's got such a low barrier to entry that it bypasses all of those like red flags, like, oh, this looks like a dry, Splendor. Actually, I'm fine with Splendor, but whatever. We'll go with that one. But it bypasses that because it doesn't even need to have a theme. It is like, there could be a Crokinole themed board game, and that would be a thing.
I think, as I was just thinking about when you're saying it, to me, it reminds me of like Gunfight at High Noon, where you basically just look at your opponent and go, draw. Who can who can outskill each other, and by shooting these discs, to me, it's much like
Our chat's saying gladiatorial combat is the theme of Crokinole.
Yeah, this is Crokinole.
Well, we had a little bit of a chat here to preface this, and I appreciate Murr for counseling me on this. But what it got me to is other games that include dexterity. To me, it's like I immediately compare them all to Crokinole, because it's like Crokinole has this certain purity to it. It has like this, like I expect a certain, I expect a certain predictability of the board, a certain, like this has to be a high quality surface. It has to be well manicured. It's got to be starting from the right pieces. And if not, it's like, no, like I passed on a Mayday board. So now it's like, would I play on a cardboard board that has paste over it with then something? Like, no way. Like it's all wrong. It's unpredictable. It's, it's underneath me, which I've played my Crokinole.
I don't know any other game that I immediately compare to. Like you said, any flicking game, I'm immediately going, how do you compare it to Crokinole? I mean, it's just this pompous kind of like, should I even bother putting you side by side?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It's like, Ice School is fine. They're penguins, by the way, in Ice School. That's why you flick. Ice School is fine if I've got kids around, but if not, I've got Crokinole right here, right? And Crokinole is one that I could show to my friends that think that I'm the biggest nerd, that they're scared of my basement because they're scared that they might actually have fun and that it will turn them into a nerd. But I could still bring Crokinole to their place, show them this, and be absolutely confident that it would be a wonderful experience.
I'm finding that same connection, engagement, and attraction with tumbling dice. I bring that to my students. It's that same, observe and imitate learning curve that my students watch it and go, I'm next. I'm in. This looks like so much fun. And they're not even really playing it to the rules. They've hybridized it. They've made their own. As my students say, we're too lazy to do the math, so we're just going to give you a point whoever wins each round. And I'm kind of like, I'm proud of you and disappointed at the same time.
And they just eyeball the math in general anyway.
Oh yeah, the teacher in me is kind of like, oh, well then what? Then come on, you got to learn at everything. And of course, the man-child in me is going, yeah, power to you.
Well, it is. It's tough to remember a specific 2-digit number. Like you have to. It gets to that point where it's like your short-term memory and your long-term memory like clash with each other. Because you have to remember that 2-digit number for the entirety of a game that's going to end with you doing a bunch of 2-digit number math. So it's like, okay, wait a minute, what did I have last turn?
And heaven forbid your brain locks up on a simple addition problem with all of your friends watching, and you sit there and go.
That would be so horrific, though, Norm. Like, I would sooner die than that.
Well, I'm apologizing right away because that happens a lot.
That's an interesting point. So,
tumbling dice. I'm seeing that game start to catch on as Crokinole does. But again, I bring it side by side, and I'm sorry, but the old dog is still running a hard race.
Oh, for certain, yeah. This dog's not slowed down at all. I have one last thing, and that is like how do you actually score your games of Crokinole? Because you could play a game of Crokinole where, you know, the winner gets a certain amount of points, but I'm pretty sure that Crokinole is played kind of like your students play tumbling dice, right? Where whoever wins the round, it doesn't matter how many points you won by. If I had 90 points in a round, you know, scored 4 of mine in the middle and had 1 in the 10 area, and you scored nothing, I still just get 1 point for winning that, right?
Yeah.
And then you played a 5, right?
Well, I mean, a lot of times with my students, and you're in a similar situation where they'll come in and go, I've only got 10 minutes in between classes. And so they'll sit down and they'll just play. Sometimes they'll do like King of the Hill and go 4 players, but whoever scores the least is out, and the next person takes the chair kind of thing. With the kids, it comes down to let's create a variant that fits the time need that we have.
For sure, yeah. It is kind of like we did a lost episode on Love Letter, and it's similar that Love Letter's first incarnation, only had it being a single hand game, and then it wasn't until it got picked up by like AEG that they made it where you had to win like 5 times. So I mean, it really is a game that can be done that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I want to have the same passionate connection with another flicking game, but like it keeps coming back to it that I'm sorry, flicking games that are going to come out, you will be compared to Crokinole, and you better bring something, you know, dynamic to the table and valid, because I mean it's like getting compared
it's
to
such a polarizing mechanism. Dexterity is so polarizing. Like if you include a heavy Euro that would otherwise be a 4.85, you know, like the heaviest game that's ever come out in the Euro genre, but then included a small, very small dexterity element. Let's just say for determining turn order every round, a dexterity element. Let's just call it a thumb war. All of a sudden now you're at a weight of 1.0 on the BGG scale. You know, like people they cannot take dexterity games seriously. It's like they're in a whole nother league all their own. And Crokinole seems to almost have beaten that sort of sentiment, you know, that sentiment that you can't take a dexterity game to the next level. And I feel like, you know, you see like Crokinole, maybe it's not the heaviest game, but it's the well-respected game in the genre. And until you actually sit down and play a game of it, I don't think there's any way that you could really know exactly what we're talking about. And that's right, Mur. We're elitist about this.
We are elitists.
Because Crokinole.
This is going to get Mur. Crokinole is the only dexterity game that is still wearing a tuxedo.
What about the penguins, though? Aren't penguins wearing tuxedos in high school?
Those things look like just little buoys bouncing on the water from what I saw.
They basically are. They really are buoys bouncing on the water.
Okay. Flip ships. I have my acquisition disorder is starting to target on flip ships because of that. I mean, it's not the same flicking as Crokinole, but you take a flicking game and you kind of try to give me Space Invaders, and I'm back to being 14 years old.
Strangely enough, Norm, it's weird that you say it now, because 10 days from now, I'm headed over to a convention where Kane Klinko, it's a local Iowa convention of all places. And since Kane Klinko, designer of flip ships, is basically local because he's like southwestern Wisconsin, they're having him show up there and he's going to be demoing flip ships. So now I have to play it. That's your fault.
You have to come back with a report. The flip ships, that completely caught my interest for and again, it's gonna get compared to Crokinole, but it's got its own unique dynamic with the whole having some theme. But I mean, if that theme is painted on, then you're back to comparing your mechanism against Crokinole, and that's a hard fight to win.
It is. It really is. Here's the thing, though. Doesn't flip ships I'm so sorry, everybody. Wow, you're gonna have to edit that one. Doesn't flip ships have a doesn't it use like the actual surface of your table?
You can use the edge of the table, or they give you this little block that you can put the disc on top of and then flick it off that block.
Okay, all right. I was just wondering, because anytime that you use an actual playing surface. It's like, have you ever been at a convention and seen some of the quality of those tables that they have out for you to play on? It's like, it looks like the rats just got at the outsides and ate them all down to their fiber boards. Like, you can't like run your finger along it without getting like a handful of splinters.
It's like, tetanus shot, please.
Tetanus shot.
Yeah, for sure. Well, oh my goodness, Mur's over there in the Norm.
Norm, it's Norm. Norm.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's I won't apologize, so he has to do it for me. Wow.
God, I'm drinking too much. There's too many apologies going around. Oh.
You guys you're missing your cues, so I have to get that in there because they're just piling up in my frontal lobe, and they just got to come out.
Wow, this has been a great discussion of Crokinole. I mean, it is one of those where when we were looking to do an episode, it was like I was like, I want to do Crokinole. I really want to do Crokinole. But part of me on the inside was like, hold on, this is a game that takes like, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to play, a round. And we're going to talk about this for literally the amount of time it takes for like the World Championship of Crokinole to actually be seated. All the players play, everything happens. You're out of there. You're already back home eating a sandwich by the time that the Longview episode length is done. But man, we have covered a wide array of topics, and it seems like a lot of them have come from you, who just has Crokinole written into your DNA. It's like, right into your heart itself. Like, I'm pretty sure your heart has concentric Crokinole circles on it, Norm, and those pegs are keeping you alive.
Those are my ribs, man. They're my ribs. They're keeping everything inside the 15.
Joe, we could talk about anything for hours.
This is true. This is true. But these have been such engaging topics, and I really thank you for that. Now, before I close anything, though, I want you to, make sure that we have covered everything you came here to discuss. Is there anything that we've missed? Is there any final say that you want to have? You want to have the last word in this skewering the roast of Crokinole?
That's it. Yeah, my hands are going, and the evil triangle is starting to come out. I've been inspired, and I think I'm going to do a little Twitter campaign, and I'll link you guys into it. But right. I discovered a Crokinole skills competition PDF that comes from I forget what tournament it is, but every once in a while they'll have, like every awesome sport, they'll have the skills competition. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to post on Twitter. I think it's 10 shots, and in 10 shots, they show the thematic setup of it. And I want to see if I can start a little Twitter movement on people videotaping their skills competition shots for Crokinole.
That would be hilarious to see. I feel like that would be one of those where you could make a montage and it would be pretty impressive.
Well, the montage would be me with my GoPro having an over-the-shoulder shot and then having to beep out a whole bunch of words because I'll miss and hit the peg and then go off and start referencing sons and mothers and flip the board. And yeah, might have a little temper when I play Crokinole.
Well, I'm pretty sure that every time you score a 20, you're just like getting your fist there, starting to like rub it, getting ready to punch the opponent in the arm as hard as you can.
Yeah, I gotta suppress that when you're playing against your kids.
Oh, of course, we went there. You gotta suppress it. Yeah. You gotta suppress it. Only when they're naughty.
Yeah, Daddy, what are you doing? Nothing. Just close your eyes.
Oh goodness, Norm. Well, it's been great. Thank you.
I apologize.
So much
I don't want anybody to think that I abuse my children. No. In fact,
not willingly.
No, yeah. It's the opposite. It's the opposite.
No. It sounds like it's really your kid that's playing you at the table anyway. It's like, here, hey, go fetch your hat. Move all the pieces on the board.
It's such an apple and tree dynamic that I can't get upset because the deception is such a mastery level at their age.
Oh boy. Well, Norm, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime. Thank you.
TC, you too, man. It's been good hearing
Oh
from you. I
yeah,
hope
this has been hilarious for a game I didn't know much about. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks, Norm, for coming on. This is
as I said in the guild post on the Long View, come listen. It's been a great episode listening to Croaking Old Norm talk about Crokinole.
Oh, I don't even want to get into how old I am.
Oh, you're just old Norm to me. It's old. It's
You're
the
old
endearment
Norm.
term. You're
good old Norm.
Good old Norm. You're good old Norm. Yeah.
Like Dana Carvey says, I'm getting to the point I reach for the remote control and I pull my shoulder out.
Well, that's why you need duct tape to fix it. You need like you need your bibs on. You should be wearing those bibs. They've got built-in shoulder protection. Your red-green bibs. Well, thanks for being here, Norm, and this has been absolutely excellent. Hope that our listeners will go and check out the Long View. Join us for more YouTube recordings, and go check out Norm. Why don't you, on our way out the door here, I haven't given you a chance yet to tell everybody where they can find more of you.
Yeah, hopefully they made it through this long.
Yeah.
I am one half of Bridge City Boardgamers, and we're on Twitter at Bridge City Boardgamers. And we also have the beginnings of a YouTube channel, and I believe you can still search it Bridge City Boardgamers. And the last thing I want to say is, sorry, everybody.
Where's my cup? Where's my cup?
And I'm sorry on behalf of Norm as well. I'll apologize for Norm. Sorry for that guy, everybody. Hope you keep coming back to episodes of The Long View. This has just been an absolute treat, Norm. I can't wait till the next time we get to have you on. And that's been this episode of The Long View. Catch us next time when we talk about games and we take a closer look at the games people play.